name is Elaine, and I work at Kelly Support Group. I've been working here for almost 2 years now, and Kelly is a youth organization based here in Hong Kong. This year is our 25th anniversary, so we're quite excited. We have a lot of different activities planned, and a little bit about what we do is go into schools and conduct workshops on drug and alcohol education. We also do long-term programs with different students around Hong Kong. A lot of them have some creative elements to them, like graffiti designing or like fashion designing. And then another thing that we do is go into big events like Clock and Flap and the Rugby Sevens, and we do some harm reduction activities. So we give out water to people who might be dehydrated or might be drinking a little bit too much alcohol, and we want them to be safe and have a good time.
This is, of course, also to raise awareness of the Kelly Support Group, to go to all these big events, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to start off with the first question. As you may or may not know, we are doing illegal drug use in Hong Kong. That is the question of like our topic, like the main question, like the main focus, if you want. And we thought that it would be better to come here since it's really accessible. So thank you for having us.
No, thank you.
So the first question is there a common theme between people who take drugs and drug dealers, like the consumers?
So that's quite an interesting question, and there are some similarities between people who deal drugs and people who do drugs, because a lot of people who end up dealing drugs used to be, drug users or are still drug users themselves. And like a big link that we see that's kind of linking to our organization and what we do is that a lot of these people who turn to drugs do have like poor self-esteem, or they have poor social connections, or they don't have as many positive like peer relationships, and that's why they go into using drugs or dealing drugs.
What do you feel that the police is doing to like reduce this illegal drug use, and like what is your opinion on it, basically?
What's my opinion? So there's a lot of different things that the police in Hong Kong are doing. As you may or may not know, there's a lot of different like police raids that are going on, especially in places that have a higher percentage of like drug users. And also places that are like hot spots for parties and drinking, because drugs often get mixed in.
Lan Kwai Fong.
Yeah, Lan Kwai Fong, Wan Chai, TST too. Those are like the three huge hubs for like police raids. Other things that they're doing are, anti-drug laws. In Hong Kong, the laws are quite strict on both possession and trafficking of drugs. And I guess the reasoning is that if the fines are that high, then it might deter some people away from using drugs. There's also a lot of police who do like customs, so they can kind of monitor the amount of drugs that are coming in through Hong Kong. Yeah, so a lot of drugs have been seized, like on the border or at the airport, so that could help too.
Judging from your website, I did have a look at that like common drug table where there was ketamine, cocaine, weed, which are all common drugs used in Hong Kong and around the world. But in the sphere of like your patients, what seems to be like the most common drug used?
So we primarily work with young people across Hong Kong, right? So that's mostly what we see, and there's been research backing up that the top few drugs for students, especially in secondary school, are cannabis, so weed or marijuana. There's ketamine, which is quite high too. cocaine, and then methamphetamine.
Yes, yeah.
But it really depends on which numbers you look at, because those are the official like government numbers. But if you see the self-reported numbers from different surveys, like the order changes quite a bit, and usually cannabis is the top of the self-reported ones.
Yeah, it should be, because the people who you work with are aged 14 to 24. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually, right? Yeah, and cocaine has a very high street value, so it's unlikely to find cocaine on someone who's 14 to 24. Or am I wrong?
Right. Yeah. So cocaine, when you compare it to a lot of other street drugs, the street value is much higher.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe people might be deterred by the price.
Okay, moving on to the next question.
Mhm.
Is there a demographic, like a specific place in Hong Kong, as to where people with drugs get caught from? Because, like, I know from looking at graphs from the Hong Kong government website, it says that Yuen Long is like a really hot place. I don't know why, but according to the graphs, it says that Yuen Long, for underage 21 people, they've caught like a very like large percentage of the people there. So, and Yuen Long is very far away from the city. So like, what are your views on this? Or like, do you have like a specific location as to like from your patients?
So the highest percentage of drug users, like by population, is actually found in, I guess it was Hong Kong Island, but it really depends on which area you're looking at. So for Yuen Long, it is quite high. It might be because it's kind of closer to the border with China, and that's where drugs kind of come from, and there are more raids like kind of up there. Other areas that are quite high are Kwun Tong, Sham Shui Po, and those are places where the socioeconomic status of people living there are a bit lower. So that's where you see maybe a slightly higher prevalence of drug use.
Just a follow up to that part where you said that people who take drugs are caught on the Hong Kong Islands. Yeah. So, but there's not meant to be that big of a police force on those islands. So how do they get caught in the first place?
Well, just like I said before, there's a lot of different raids that are operating in these different hotspots, and I guess I'm just talking specifically about like where the blue line is, like from, I don't know, I guess around Central to like Causeway Bay area. That's quite like a hotspot for that.
This may seem like a bit of a broad question, but it is from your own experience. Why might some people take drugs?
Okay, so a lot of the students that we interact with who might have started using drugs, a lot of them say that curiosity and peer pressure are two like major factors in why they would start using drugs. And we hope that through our like education programs we can kind of teach them other ways that they can cope with stress or like anxiety or peer pressure, so that they don't kind of fall into this trap of using drugs or doing other like unhealthy behaviors to cope with it.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, curiosity, peer pressure.
Not low self-esteem?
Low self-esteem is one as well, and I guess it's a lot of different factors that kind of interplay with each other to make people more susceptible to taking drugs.
Yeah, it can be like very confusing. Are the patients in here in Kelly's support group going up or down? And is this due to the population of like schools? I guess like there's more students now and there's more people in Hong Kong, or is this just because more people are getting in trouble and getting caught taking drugs?
Well, in terms of Kelly, we personally don't take in patients, so we don't do like one-on-one counseling, even though that's what we were known for before, but we don't have that service right now. So what we do is to kind of give to refer students to different services if they do need it. But as you might know from your school, we do take in speakers who might have been addicts before or are still struggling with addiction to come in and talk with the students. But in terms of your question, in Hong Kong, the numbers actually have been decreasing year by year. So in 2013, there were about 10,200 registered drug users, like on the database. But then it kind of dropped down to like 8,500 in 2015. So it kind of seems like a steep drop for just 2 years. But there's been growing research that there are more students or more people in general that are taking drugs at home or at their friend's home or somewhere where it's really difficult for people to like actually know that you're taking drugs. So this like thing of hidden drug use is becoming quite big in Hong Kong. So we can look at the numbers and the trends and say, okay, it's going down, but like we have to take this into consideration.
Yeah. You have to take into the consideration that these are the statistics that are people getting caught. But what about the people who are not getting caught?
Yeah. So we think that the number is much higher than it actually is on the government websites.
Yeah, sure. Is Hong Kong taking the right steps to solve this really complex issue? And if not, what would you do different, or what would you change or improve?
One thing that Hong Kong could improve on is to have schools embrace a more well-rounded curriculum when it comes to this issue, because actually a lot of schools, a lot of local schools, but also a lot of international schools don't have social education about like, you know, how to have a positive self-esteem, or how to deal with peer pressure, or how to have positive relationships with your classmates and your friends. So I think if the Hong Kong government kind of pushes this and in a healthy way, and it's backed up by research, then I think we can see a more like well-rounded view of like reducing drug use in students. In terms of other things, I think they are doing a good job with like the customs department in seizing drugs.
Yeah, the security is really good.
But in terms of laws and fines for drug use and drug trafficking, Hong Kong is on the higher end of, you know, countries that have drug laws.
Again, this may seem like another broad question, but how long does the rehab of somebody who takes drugs usually take? Now, I know that there's a lot of factors that you have to take into consideration when someone is in rehab, but just like, can you give us a kind of like a scope of how long it takes?
Yeah, so like you said, there's a lot of different factors. A lot of the people who have struggled with addiction say that they will be in recovery for the rest of their lives, just because it's something that can trigger them at any moment. So maybe an alcoholic who's stopped alcohol for years and years, but every time they see an ad on the TV, they start salivating because they're like, they get triggered by, you know, the sight or the smell of alcohol or just the thought of alcohol. So this is something that people struggle with for a very long time. That being said, there's a lot of different programs that can range from like a couple months to a couple years, depending on how serious the situation is. And usually people go into like behavioral therapy, and also they might take medication so that it stops the dopamine from firing as much, or so that they don't get this feeling of like being addicted as much.
What steps do you feel that parents should take if they either want to have the drug talk with their son or daughter, or they find out that the son or daughter is taking drugs?
I think it's really good for parents to have an open conversation with their child or children, because a lot of times, like when the child is doing something that they think they'll get punished for if they tell the parents, then they just kind of hide it away, right?
Yeah.
And they might get into deeper and deeper trouble by doing this. So what I encourage parents to do is to have an open conversation. The earlier the better, so before like any of these are like really high risk behaviors for that age, and try not to become like too angry or emotional or like scold the kid, and just make sure that the kid knows that you have their best interest in mind, and that you're talking to them because you love them and you care for them, and not because you want them to like have like severe ramifications or punishment.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so at Kelly we also do these kind of parent-teacher trainings, so that parents and teachers and like educators can be more informed when they're talking to students.
Okay, thank you, Elaine, for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this interview with us.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.